closer.
A little closer. Ooh. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Debbie Boar. I'm the Deputy Project Director at the Harlem Community Justice Center. You heard from my boss, Chris Watler, earlier today. And so I'm just going to start by introducing a little bit about the center and our work, and then I'm going to get into a specific initiative called the Harlem Parole Reentry Court, which luckily we now know works. And I'll talk a little bit about our evaluation that has demonstrated that we're an effective project. So I work for the Center for Court Innovation, which is a nonprofit criminal justice think tank that partners with law enforcement and other agencies to test new approaches to really challenging community issues such as violence and recidivism. So we often function as a learning lab for the Justice Center. We'll pitch a new idea to an agency, we'll roll it out and implement it, and then we'll test it to see if it actually is a more effective approach to reducing the problem. So what is a community justice center, right? I work out of the Harlem Community Justice Center, which is actually a project of the Center for Court Innovation. And the difference between a community justice center and a traditional court is that a community justice center is focused on the issues that are confronting the community. We actually go out into the community and survey the landscape and ask our stakeholders, what are the most important issues that are affecting you and your families and your businesses and your churches? And so in Harlem, we focus on 3 areas. Housing, prisoner reentry, and juvenile justice. The other main difference between a community court and a traditional court is that we really focus on getting to those underlying issues that bring people into the system in the first place. So in addition to those important people like lawyers and judges, we also have people who specialize in behavior change, because really isn't that what we're trying to do, is help people change their behavior so they don't go back to jail or prison. So we have social workers, we have advocates, we have intake coordinators, all partnering with lawyers and judges to help people do things different to stay out of the justice system. So I oversee a few prison and jail initiatives. One is the Manhattan Reentry Task Force, which we co-chair with DOCS and with Danny, the District Attorney's Office. And also a few employment programs for justice-involved young adults. But as I said, I'm going to be focusing on the Harlem Parole Reentry Court. So why Harlem? So why Harlem? So we are obviously sitting in Harlem right now, and we all know it's a very culturally diverse place to be. Unfortunately, it's also one of the most one of the highest poverty levels in the country. It actually scores a 10 out of 10 on the poverty index. We see a disproportionate amount of crime and violence in Harlem. It's also home to a few of the precincts that actually see the most gun violence in all of the state, as some young adults who are involved in crews or informal gangs are in turf wars between housing projects. And unfortunately, we'll see a lot of those young people on the back end of their sentences at the reentry court. So Manhattan County itself receives about 2,500 individuals returning from prison every year. And that's the highest of any county in New York City. And as you've heard before, these individuals come home not only confronting the same issues that led them to the justice system in the first place, but many of them come home with trauma, a deep sense of shame, and a whole list of collateral consequences that now accompany them. So it's no wonder that about 40% of individuals return to prison within 3 years in New York State. And 30% of those are for something called technical violations, and 10% are for new felony convictions. So felony convictions are more serious crimes. Does everyone here know what a technical violation is? No. Okay. So most individuals who are released from prison owe time. So they haven't served their entire sentence while still in prison. So they're considered to still be under supervision. And so that is why we have community supervision, to oversee these individuals for the length of their sentence. So when one leaves prison, they have to sign a whole set of conditions that really determines how, or it's supposed to determine how they're going to conduct themselves in the community. So usually there are about 12 conditions around employment, curfew, who they'll associate with, and sometimes there are special conditions. If you're a gang member, to stay away from certain people. If you're a sex offender, maybe not to look at pornography. They can be very individualized. And so if an individual violates one of those conditions, the legal standard is in an important respect. A parole officer can actually drop a warrant and pull that person out of the community to go in front of a judge for a hearing. And the judge at that point will decide whether or not the person violated parole, and they could either be resentenced to a period of time in jail or prison, or they can be sent back to the community to do their time. So next. Okay, so what do we do about it? So understanding the success that the Center for Court Innovation has had with other crime problems, DOCS, the Department of Community Supervision, actually approached us about 2001, to ask us to design a new model that would really focus on driving down those parole revocations and also hopefully reduce crime. So we co-designed a reentry court with them. That's some of our team members to the left, and you might notice a few of them sitting in the audience. So what is a reentry court? A reentry court uses an entire transitional team to help an individual who's returning from prison reintegrate into society. So in addition to a parole officer, on staff, we have 4 parole officers on staff, a senior parole officer, and then we have those helpers. We have a supervising social worker who's a reentry coordinator, 3 case managers, a workforce development specialist, a family engagement specialist, and a reentry aide. And so half of our non-parole staff are also formally incarcerated themselves. And this is important because in addition to having the kind of skills that help people change behavior, they're credible messengers, and they provide role modeling for individuals who are in the court. So the most unique aspect, obviously, of a reentry court is that we have a judge. So typically, an individual would only see a judge on the back end if they were violated on parole. Here what we do is we actually front end the judge. And we do this for a few reasons. One is that we're enacting what we call procedural justice, which is the idea that when people are treated fairly, when they have an opportunity to be heard, and when they feel part of a process, they're more likely to comply with the conditions or sanction, even if it goes against them. And that makes sense to all of us, but as we know from Mr. Smith and from our experiences, we know that that doesn't always happen in courtrooms. Another reason that we use a judge is because they can hold all parties accountable and engage us in shared decision making. And we know that usually shared decision making allows us to come up with better solutions. So how does it work? So we assess individuals while they're still in prison, and those who are at a moderate to high risk of recidivism are actually routed to us instead of the main parole office at 40th Street. And I'll focus on why we focus on moderate to high risk individuals in a minute. It's really interesting to note that our clients are not those clients who tend to have made one mistake, come out of prison, and done well. Our average client at the time of the evaluation had 8 prior felony convictions, 4 custodial sentences, and most of their crimes were violent crimes. And so this is important to note, one, because our evaluation is going to show that we can actually change behaviors, right? There are things that work, and many of our clients did very, very well after incarceration. The other thing is that the other process didn't work for them, right? Parole, as it is, did not work for them. So we had to try something new. So before release, we actually release out to family members. We hold an orientation in which we invite family to partner with us on their reentry home. And this is important because often families have no idea what's going on with their family members. Their loved one might be pulled in multiple directions, right? They're supposed to take care of their children, but they also have to go to drug treatment and get a job. The family might actually also serve as an early warning detection system for us if something's going to go wrong. So the focus is catching problems early and not waiting until the individual is rearrested or revoked on parole. Upon release, the client will meet with a case manager and the parole officer and the entire team to begin deciding what is the plan for this individual going forward. And we focus on what are called criminogenic needs. So this is a fancy word, but what it means is that we focus on issues that science has told us if left unaddressed, will lead an individual back to prison. So what happens? So the major one for individuals who are at high risk of recidivism is the way that they think. So we have to target the way that they think and their decision-making skills if we're going to help them change. The second is who they spend time with. We know that peers are very, very influential in whether or not somebody makes a decision to commit a crime. The other very important ones include employment, as we all know, education, family, and substance abuse. So within 2 weeks of release, our clients will go before the judge. They'll be the case manager and present as well, and start to really get to know who the client is and how we as a team can support them. We meet on a weekly basis down at the parole offices to problem solve and to engage in shared decision making. After 9 months of programming, we do interventions at the court, and we have strong referral partners who come to the court on Thursdays, which is our parole day. We will transfer the individual back to traditional parole, or rather to traditional parole for the first time. And we celebrate their success. Most of our clients have never had any type of graduation, and the community has never come together to say, we're glad that you're here and you've done a good job. Our next graduation, just a plug, is November 19th. And so I'm happy to get people's emails to send out an invite. So, why does what we do work? Next. Okay, so we use what we call evidence-based practices at the court. These are just practices that have been tested and grounded in research. There are 8 key practices that any program that is targeting recidivism should be using in order to change behavior. That's not to say if they don't use these, you might not see some outcomes associated with crime reduction, but these are the ones that we really have to focus on, especially for moderate and high-risk individuals. So first, we use a validated risk assessment tool. This tool looks at static and dynamic factors. So that means you look at a static factor, things that can change no matter what we do. We're not going to change the gender of the person, the age of the person, or their history. But then we also look at the dynamic factors, those criminogenic needs. Who is the person's family? Family is a huge protective factor. How does the person think? Who are they spending time with? What's their education level? And we can actually, with this tool, create a roadmap to tell us, instead of just throwing programs at people, what we should be doing to help affect change. So second is then we target our interventions. So I talked a little bit about the need principle. We know what people need. But who do we target in the intervention in the first place? We know that moderate and high-risk people need a lot more intervention to change their trajectory than low-risk people. So at the court, we're hands-off low-risk people. They may have many, many needs. We may provide them in our drop-in services, but likely if we see them, we're going to refer them out because our intervention is just too intensive for them. And the treatment principle really is, for me, what the court is all about. It tells us what everyone in this room knows. Punishment alone does not change behavior. We have to give people the tools to make change if we expect them to do so. So one of the other important, So one of the important types of modalities we use is called motivational interviewing. So when someone is released, everybody wants to tell them what to do, right? You have to do this, change this. We all know from our own personal lives that nobody has ever gotten us to change because we've been told to do so. In fact, there's a lot of new research that says that the same brain receptors that experience physical pain light up when a person is told what to do. So instead of telling our clients what to do, we use a strategy called MI, or motivational interviewing. And that strategy is focused on helping the individual identify their own ambivalence around change. Asking them, there are a lot of good reasons that you are using drugs. Name me the reasons that you're using drugs. And accepting those reasons, right? That is a coping mechanism that has served them for many, many years. And then we can turn to what are the reasons the reasons to change. And that's what we begin focusing on, is helping develop the individual's ambivalence so that they'll start to make other decisions. In the recent training we had, our trainer called motivational interviewing love with a purpose. And so it is a very non-judgmental, loving approach with the directed purpose of helping people make better decisions. We also use cognitive behavioral therapy, which has shown is the single most important intervention that one can use to help change thinking. So with very, very high-risk clients, some of which we have to do CBT, and we do it on site. And that helps people start to regulate their emotions, teaches people how to recognize problematic thinking and help actually change the way they think so that they don't get in trouble. And lastly, it focuses on social skills, asking for help, responding to anger, asking a question. Some things that many of us take for granted, but many of our clients who grew up literally at beginning of 9 years old selling drugs and on the streets just didn't learn from mom and dad. So very importantly, we focus on engaging support in natural communities, and really that's what this is about today. So the J.C. Flowers Foundation approached us a few years ago, and they were interested in how we ignite what we call informal social networks, family and friends, people in our clients' natural communities to help in the reentry process. So we designed a model that now includes the family orientations and home visits. 2 minutes? Okay, and home visits, and began reaching out to the faith community and invite them to work with us in the courthouse. So we put some brochures outside a little bit about circles of support, and so I'm happy to talk about that with you a little more. So let's skip to the last slide. Poor Marco's not, I'm not going to tell Marco's story. Okay. All right, so yes, thank God, the last 6 years of my life has been very productive. And because of the entire team effort and our strategy, we learned through a randomized controlled trial, which is the gold standard in research, that the Reentry Court is very effective. So we took about 200 parolees in traditional parole, compared them with 200 in the Reentry Court. And so you can see the results up there. We reduced felonies and serious convictions by 60% and parole revocations by 45%. Thank you.